Through the eyes of man it seems there's so much we have lost. As we look down the road where all the prodigals have walked, and one by one the enemy has whispered lies and led them off as slaves. But we know that you are God, yours is the victory. We know there is more to come that we may not yet see. So with the faith you've given us, we step into the valley unafraid. We call out to dry bones, come alive, come alive. We call out to dead hearts, come alive, come alive. Up out of the ashes, let us see an army rise. We call out to dry bones, come alive. God of endless mercy, God of unrelenting love, rescue every daughter, bring us back the wayward sons, and by your Spirit breathe upon them, show the world that you alone can save. You alone can save. We call out to dry bones, come alive, come alive. We call out to dead hearts, come alive, come alive. Up out of the ashes, let us see an army rise. We call out to dry bones, come alive. So breathe, oh breath of God, now breathe, oh breath of God, breathe, oh breath of God, now breathe. So breathe, oh breath of God, now breathe, oh breath of God, breathe, oh breath of God, now breathe. So breathe, oh breath of God, now breathe, oh breath of God, breathe, oh breath of God, now breathe. We call out to dry bones, come alive, come alive. We call out to dead hearts, come alive, come alive. Up out of the ashes, let us see an army rise. We call out to dry bones, come alive. We call out to dry bones, come alive. I can't see what's in front of me. Still I will trust you. Still I will trust you. I can't see what's in front of me. Still I will trust you. Still I will trust you. Steady heart that keeps on going, steady love that keeps on holding, lead me on. Steady grace that keeps forgiving, steady faith that keeps believing, lead me on. never leave me. You'll never leave me. Though the night is long, there is a coming dawn. The light is breaking. The light is breaking. Steady heart that keeps on going. Steady love that keeps on holding. Lead me on. Steady grace that keeps forgiving. Steady faith that keeps believing. Lead me on. Steady heart that keeps on going. Steady love that keeps on holding. Lead me on. Steady grace that keeps forgiving. Steady faith that keeps believing. Lead me on. And as the dawn breaks and the clouds clear, in an open space, together we will run. For anyone who's prayed 1,000 prayers and still can't find the answer anywhere, fighting off the lie that no one cares. For anyone who's out there losing hope, feeling you're forsaken and alone, clinging to the last strands of your rope. May God give you eyes to see He's still greater, courage to rise and believe He's able. May God be your peace in the fire you're walking through. This is my prayer now. This is my prayer for you. For all of those with tired and weary souls, but still have faith to ask for miracles, choosing to believe He's in control. May God give you eyes to see He's still greater, courage to rise and believe He's able. May God be your peace in the fire you're walking through. This is my prayer now. This is my prayer. May your eyes be ever prayer for you. Through the eyes of man, it seems there's so much we have lost. As we look down the road where all the prodigals have walked, and one by one the enemy has whispered lies and led them off as slaves. But we know that you are God, yours is the victory. We know there is more to come that we may not yet see. So with the faith you've given us, we step into the valley unafraid. We call out to dry bones, come alive, come alive. We call out to dead hearts, come alive, come alive. Up out of the
I was part of Awana, which was called, who knows? It wasn't Awana back then. Space Cubs, Jet Cadets, Cubbies. It was those, I forget all of them, but we wore beanies instead of sashes, so it wasn't cool back then either. So in case you were wondering, what was cool is that we heard the gospel. And so many of you, Renee Schmitz has I don't know if Renee's here today, but she has a soft spot in my heart because I terrorized her in Awana activities, and she was kind and gracious to me. Heard the gospel at a young age, accepted Christ, I don't know, at some point early on, and then got to my teenage years and decided I liked chasing girls and playing sports, and it was always like, man, yeah, I'm going to follow Jesus on Sunday morning and Wednesday, and then Friday and Saturday would come, and you'd always have your priorities kind of shifting for me. And somewhere right around graduation of high school, I got baptized at the Renzes by Paul Harder, along with Neil Gilsdorf, if you recognize any of those names. And somewhere right in there, around my freshman year of college, I really made my faith my own, got baptized, and started walking with God, and have been holy and pure ever since, and haven't sinned. So it's been a good ride. Not true. She'll tell you. And but went into ministry. So I went to Wayne State. Was going to do with Cameron Sidek, if you know that name. We roomed together. We had the same scholarship program, same as Nick, I believe. The idea was to go back to rural Nebraska and practice, for me, dentistry, for Cameron, medicine. Along the way, started a ministry that took off, went great guns, and saw the Lord doing so much. Eventually felt called into full-time ministry, which is what we did. Faith Community supported us for many, many years, and many of you individually supported us as we served mostly in the state of Nebraska with Crew. So that's me. And Tara, where'd you grow up?
Yeah, I actually grew up just down the road. I grew up in Spencer, Nebraska, and I grew up in a Christian home, Christian family, and actually Connie Kirsch out of VBS explained to me at 6 years old how much Jesus loved me, and I had known that, heard that, but then she said something along the lines of like, he loves you even more than your parents love you. And I had parents who loved me pretty well, and so that just kind of rattled my brain a little bit. And after that, I thought that's worth probably doing because I feel like that's a really good thing. And so I accepted Christ then and just kind of grew up in the church, figured it out, walked with the Lord. But my dad chose to go into the pastorate when I was around 15. And so at 15, I had this crisis of faith where I was like, am I going to believe what my dad says just because he's a pastor, or am I going to really figure this thing out on my own? And so he was really gracious in that process, and I kind of explored, asked a million questions, tried to figure out what I wanted to run after. And so by the time I was leaving high school, I was excited to go to college, get involved in a group on campus that had a lot of Christians who kind of had the same belief system as me, and kind of followed Christ and not just went to church, but really understood what it meant. And I showed up at Wayne State College. I had a similar program as Ethan. I was going for PT school. And showed up at Wayne State, got involved in Campus Crusade after we started the chapter, saw God doing a million things, and just felt like this is what I love doing. I love being with these women. I love talking about what God is doing. And so kind of separately, we said, I think ministry is kind of where we're headed. Then we had started dating my sophomore year, his junior year, and got married.
She just kept asking and asking. Fine, we'll go on one date.
People ask us often, did you know each other in high school? Y'all grew up 30 minutes apart. Did you know each other? And I said, no, by God's grace, we never met. Because I probably would not have dated high school Ethan, but college Ethan was pretty attractive. And so, we actually went to Camp Witness together at 10. Didn't know that until Marlene Weecamp broke out the scrapbooks, and I found a picture that I also owned. So and it was fun.
In the picture, literally, I'm front row, and she's right behind me. We never met. There's probably 40 kids in the picture. Steph Harder's in there. David Cohen's there. There's probably others. Pretty funny.
Yeah, pretty crazy. So God kept us apart long enough so that we could figure him out and then find each other. And then we got married. After Ethan graduated, I had 1 year left. We did an internship with Crew, went on staff. And currently we have 4 kids. And we have Isabella, who's 12, and Isaiah is almost 10. Noah is 8, and Levi is 5. So that's what my primary role for the last 5 years has been, raising those kiddos as we've done grad resources and everything after crew.
Yep. You can hang on to that. They've got one pin.
I'm not
for me.
done. Okay.
And then I don't know, Ted, are there other questions or do we open it up or how's it go from there? Yeah, I am. Tara's ready.
Yes, I think I'm ready.
If I could, I'll steal that back from you.
Yes.
Here's what this will look like. We'll kind of throw you some easy hitters, and then we'll maybe make them a little tougher. And at the end, I've been through interviews before where at the end I thought, why didn't they ask me about this, or why didn't they ask me about that? So we'll give you a chance to, if there's things that we didn't hit that you thought of. And then in this list, you maybe hit a little of this already, but if you feel like you've already got it, like the first one is, how did the two of you meet? If you feel you've covered that, great. If you want to expound a little bit, you can expound a little bit, okay?
Yeah. I'll tell the story a little bit.
Is there another microphone on?
Stealing my thunder a little bit from the sermon. I maybe go forward and miss that feedback that's coming. But I had gone to Wayne State and got involved. I told the elders this yesterday. Let me back up a little bit. So I was here at 17, junior in high school. My brother had gotten involved with Navigators at Lincoln, UNL, and they were just the big going ministry. So they had I know 400 freshmen at that time. So maybe 700, 800 college students. When I would go down, they'd have all these really cool activities, gospel-centered, and then we'd go to the Berean College Ministry, which at the time was just huge, and it was so fun. So my picture of Wayne State was UNL, and I was like, man, of course. I'll just go, and there'll be all these people. It'll be so fun. And we had a really great experience of youth group it'll just transfer over. We had about 100 kids that would come and cram into the chapel. So I went to Wayne State, and I said, man, I am going to get involved. I was rooming with Cameron Sidek and Neil Gilsdorf, so Faith Community guys. And we are going to go get involved in the biggest, best ministry on campus. So we went and checked them all out. Every single ministry that existed. I went and checked out the Catholic ministry and the Lutheran ministry because I was like, I'm just going to check them all off. There weren't that many. And I got involved in the biggest, best one, and it was FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and it had 12 students. And I'm not even kidding. 8 were homeschooled, and so homeschoolers, we love you, but that was what it was, and that was a little while ago, so homeschool has gotten cool now. Like, Lean, you were homeschooled. Like, that, it's cool now. It wasn't always cool. And so got involved, and it was rough, and so we prayed, the 3 of us in our dorm room, every day, Bowen 311 at Wayne State, that God would do a work at Wayne State. So we finished that year with 30 or 40 students involved, saw a handful of people come to faith. But then the next year, we sort of got organized. We said, hey, we need to catch these freshmen before they get involved in all these other things. We had just watched that our freshman year. Like people who had walked with God or come from Christian backgrounds, immediately within that first month, if they didn't find Christian friends, it was hard. And they found alcohol and they found sin really quickly, where they didn't find us very quickly. And so we were like out before the freshmen got there. So I was sitting at an FCA booth. So there's no way I would have been at that FCA booth if Kevin Young hadn't started FCA. Back before he was a Husky, he was an Eagle. So that was really fun. He started an FCA, and there's a bunch of people involved, a bunch of non-Christians involved who would come just because of that dynamic of the athlete portion probably. And so anyway, I was at that FCA booth, and up comes a pretty girl who was asking about ministries. And what'd you say? Do you remember?
I said, do you have a campus crusade on this campus?
And I said, get involved with FCA. So they don't call me dumb. I might not be the smartest guy, but it's like, nah, I don't know, but come to our group. And so she did, and eventually, it's kind of a funny story because we ended up on staff with Campus Crusade for 12 years. We still support Campus Crusade staff. That's got a place in our heart, probably forever. But yeah, that was sort of our first interactions. And then we started dating, and Marlene pulled out the scrapbook, and, oh, Camp Witness, you're kidding me. When we introduced our parents, they go, oh, Leroy, I don't know why I didn't make that connection. In '85, we did that thing out at the deal, and it's like, what? So, crazy.
Are you more comfortable standing, or should I grab a chair? Because it's taking about 1 second. Would you guys rather sit or stand?
Oh, stand's fine for me.
Yeah.
All right. Tell us, what do you enjoy doing with your leisure time? When you have leisure time, what is fun for you?
So leisure is the word if you're not chasing kids. I don't know if you
Okay, yeah.
remember. Okay, you good?
Hobbies are hard for us. No, we enjoy as a family going outside. Like we love camping, we love going out and playing, tinkering, building forts. So we like being outside a lot. We like hiking. And then also, because of this last year in COVID, we kind of started watching every Avenger movie in order. So we kind of like Marvel also. But mostly, yeah, we just like getting outside and just finding an adventure. Ethan's pretty spontaneous. I'm pretty adaptable. And so he comes up with a really fun idea. We all just make it work, and we go have an adventure whenever we get a chance. So
Yeah, in our 20s, we did the fixer-upper thing. So especially with crew, we had a schedule that we worked a lot of nights and weekends. So during the day, we could be working on house projects. My brother does real estate in Lincoln. And so, yeah, mostly in our 20s, maybe early 30s, we did, not to age myself there, but we did, I mean, since we're in our 20s, we we would do these, the fixer-upper things. So we flipped a bunch of houses and a couple apartment buildings and had a couple rentals and that sort of thing. That was really fun for us. And then we used to, once upon a time, Tara was a really good athlete. I tried to participate in O'Neill. And so we used to play sports, but now we just coach kids.
This next question, what are your thoughts about moving to a rural setting? You guys are in Lincoln right now. You live in Eagle, just east. Did you share in your testimony a little bit about going to Dallas and some of that?
I don't think I hit that.
Do you want to hit a little bit of that?
Sure.
That's
Yeah.
a little bit of your story I think is important.
Yeah, so we were 12 years in Lincoln, working Campus Crusade for Christ. We had our oldest, Isabel. You want to wave? Mm-hmm. There she is, in between the Mias. And we had Isabel, when she hit kindergarten, it became, because we were working a lot of nights and weekends, I did a ton of preaching at nights around the state. So you can imagine if you live in Lincoln, you preach at Wayne State, starting at like 9, you don't get home until 1 or 2 in the morning, which was fine until you have kids that are school age. We chose public school, so that really dictated our schedule. So as soon as that hit, we realized, oh man, something's got to give. We're going to have to change our schedule. So we were looking for a change. Tara and I were co-leaders of our team in Lincoln, so we were overseeing the state, so it was about 24 ministries, 25 staff was sort of our primary responsibility. But we knew that had to shift and change. And so we were praying into some different opportunities. We thought that would be with crew. We did not. We got some inquiries if we'd go down to the national headquarters or the regional, and we were not super interested in that. Didn't feel like that's where God was leading us. And my name got given to a firm that was searching for a president, CEO of Grad Resources, very similar to Crew, but specifically for graduate students. And at that point, I had about half the coursework for a PhD completed. I'd had that experience. And so it just felt like a natural fit. We really, even to this day, feel like God really called us down there to Dallas. So no friends, no family. Found out Tara was pregnant like a week after we said yes to that. So that was neat. And moved down and got plugged in down there. We were there for 4 years. And then really after that experience felt called we were hoping to come back with City Light in Omaha to plant rural churches. So they've done, as the name would suggest, City Light. At the time when we were coming back, they had started some rural church planting, and we were super interested in doing what they had done in Iowa over in Nebraska. But they've since shifted a little bit, and they're doing big, major university cities. And that just didn't fit with what we were hoping for in the next stage. So anyway, from there, I taught at Midland University. I did a bunch of odd jobs, and most recently took an executive position with a technology firm in Lincoln, and we were attending City Light Lincoln. We love those guys. Those are guys who came to faith through our ministry. If you know, Mo and Austin both came to faith through Crew in Nebraska. So we were attending there not too long, maybe a month, when they asked me to take an executive pastor position. So I've been there with City Light Lincoln, 27th and O. A bunch of O'Neill people go. Teal, Van Horn, Aaliyah, Jay, yeah, a bunch of O'Neill people go there. You probably know them all. They are probably your kids. And so hopefully you know them. So been there since August or late July and love it. But again, we've always felt a heart and a pull ever since high school probably. We both took the scholarship, very similar to Nick, where like you're committing to come back to a rural area. And so at 17, 18, we were both saying, yeah, I could do that. I could do that with my life. And that's just been a confirmation over and over. So when Faith Community called and said, hey, would you consider it? When was that, August? I was like, oh, there's no way. And then a little bit later, it's like, well, maybe in about a year or at some point, and then it becomes a reality. You go, whoa, this could all line up. So I prayed into it, and we're here. So.
Yeah, I feel like just growing up in a smaller setting, and then what we did with Campus Crusade for Christ was a little not traditional. So most of the time you'll have staff that go to a campus and they're primarily on that one campus. What we did with Nebraska is we had experienced student leadership where a staff would come and coach us, but as students we led. And so that was our primary model. So our heart was to go to these campuses that no one else wanted to go to, no one else could go to build a team big enough to reach it because the campus was too small. And so from the beginning, I feel like we've seen this thread of like, we don't mind tackling the small, we like the small, we kind of enjoy, but also we see the need in the smaller areas. My dad is a pastor in Butte. He has a church up there. But just even in conversations with him over the years, just understanding that there's just a different culture and a different need that is in the smaller areas, and we have experienced a heart for the people in rural communities. And even as we come back up from Dallas, we were saying there's just not just a need, but there's just part of us that fits with the dynamic of a rural setting. And so it took a little bit of hindsight for us to kind of see, but we see that kind of peppered throughout our story, I think.
Terry gets visibly happy, at least did when we were coming from Dallas, a ride around the Chambers corner, just right in there. And it can't be positive associations with Chambers because she was Spencer Napier, and Chambers would whoop Spencer Napier back in the day. So it's just coming back to the area. She smiles and her eyes crinkle, so it's fun.
This is tie in, since you've been talking about ministry. What are some of the ways in which God's confirmed your work in ministry, whether it's teaching, counseling, the soul-winning part? What are some of the ways where God has confirmed your work?
Yeah. So we continue my story at Wayne State, and that was part of the reason I dropped the scholarship and said, hey, I think God's calling me into ministry, that's kind of a fun story. So I call Marlene and Leroy, and I tell, hey, I think I'm going to drop the scholarship. And, so what's the plan? I'm probably going to go into ministry. So probably? Probably? So what's the plan with that? Well, if I had to do it today, I'd raise my support and join Campus Crusade. My Leroy is saying, so you're going to not take the free college, pay for college so that you can go raise support and maybe do ministry. It's like, and this was back in the the Curly days, Curly telephone wire. So they were both on the phone, and you guys know them probably. Some they are not easily agitated people, and I'm on the phone with them talking, and they're both talking so much at the same time. Eventually, I just said, "Hey guys, I just got to call you back," and hung up. They called, like, "Okay, okay, oh sorry, son. Okay, so tell me more." And they did, so I hung up, and I didn't answer for like an hour. Because they just kept calling. So, and now my own kids, I kind of understand it. But anyway, that was a fun story. So that part of the confirmation is in the midst of that. Taking a step of faith, it feels like stepping into the Jordan. God asks you to move forward, and then he parts the seas. The next year, our group doubled. We saw about 100 people come to faith. One of those was Chris Aruska, who started the City Light family. Another one was Joe Julian, who's pastor. of a church of, maybe 2,000 a week that attend. Another one's Jason Gangwish, who spent 10 years as a worship pastor. I could do this all day. About 4 missionaries to China in that group of 100. So that year we saw about 100 people come to faith. We left, and there was right around 350 or 400 that attended every week. So it was about 10% of the student body showed up to a Christian event every week in college. And you go, never thought that would happen. Campus Crusade has a global publication that they send out. So there's been one time they've highlighted the U.S. campus ministry out of all their 40-some-odd ministries in 100 countries. So one time that they've highlighted the U.S. campus ministry, and the picture on the cover is Chris Rusko, who is from Wayne State College. And that went all over the globe talking about what was happening at Wayne State. And you go, like that doesn't happen to us. That it hasn't happened since then. But that's one of those times where, by our last count, we had at least 30 pastors that came out of that group of people that were involved at that time. So that was one of those where you just go, for us, I know it's not, but it feels a little bit like the book of Acts, where you just go, holy cow, we had no staff, no trained people, no seminary classes, just a handful of people who were willing to say yes and tell people about Jesus, and it went crazy. You want to tell them about the state of Nebraska after that?
Yeah, so some of what we did was the coaching aspect, and we would go around the state, and we just saw God raise up leaders on every campus around the state. We took about a year and went around, and then, of course, if you think about it, there's some schools that are 2-year schools, so you launch them, and then you go away, and then you have to relaunch them. And so that was kind of our process, but all the while, it's this idea of raising up leaders, finding leaders who are willing to say yes and work with us as staff coaches. And so we just got to see God raise up a bunch of leaders through that process. We got to see God work on campuses that, again, a lot of campus ministries just won't go to because of the resources. They don't have the resources to put people there. We just found the resources at the campus through the students. And so we got to see God work through that a lot. And in the process, Ethan was invited to lead a San Diego Summer Project, and that was another opportunity where we got to just have an opportunity to train and invest in students from all over the United States. And then specifically, you have people who are filling out a pretty long application and divulging a lot of things that they're walking through in sin and anything else, and then they're saying yes to raising their support and coming. So you're working with students who have gone through a process and really want to be there and really want to grow, and so it becomes this greenhouse of just watching God work and cultivate hearts, show students how he's working back on their campuses. And so we got to see not only God worked through the state of Nebraska, but we also got to see these students be sent out to these different campuses, and we'd hear stories coming back of just how God was working through those. And again, it's not really a ton of what we did necessarily, but God was just so gracious to put us in these amazing places where we had the opportunity to see him at work. So.
Very good. Ethan, you should know if you would come here, how you got off the phone with your parents, that wouldn't be an option here as far as agitated calls from members or staff.
They would text, too. It's all different. It's changed.
It has changed. Ethan, this is kind of yours probably. What is your primary preaching style? Expository, topical, combination?
Expository, yep. Verse by verse through a book. Context, yep. I think specifically New Testament, as you look at the letters and the epistles, like you guys know this, but I'll say it again. Like Ephesians was written to the church at Ephesus. It was meant to be read all together. And so there's over 2,000 years, we got to fill in some of the cultural context, the historical context, even the language context that we miss in the modern day, sitting in O'Neill reading our NIV or ESV. We miss a lot of what they would have known at that time. But they would have read that all together, all in one letter, just like you would read one email today. And so, expository. And there's times, obviously, where there's a topic that comes up, so we got to cover that topic. But generally speaking, I would say the majority, expository. And again, Tara's main ministry is solos in a musical sense. So that's what you could really expect for, no, we're not musical. Did I mention that? We're not musical.
Tara actually doesn't love the stage. So.
What is your view of inspiration and inerrancy?
Yes. All right. Oh, yeah, I believe the Bible is the inspired, inerrant Word of God. Yep. Inspired by God, and every single piece of the Bible is there on purpose for a purpose. Yeah, and it's inerrant that God knew exactly what he was doing when he was putting it together. The canon was put together by men at 320 or whenever the councils were that were progressively putting it together. Council of Nicaea in particular, but that one, that God was working through those men, and that what we have 2,000 years later is not missing the Book of Mormon. It's not missing the Book of Thomas. It's not missing anything. It is complete and whole for us.
What are your thoughts on different styles of worship?
Yeah, so I tend toward just a culturally appropriate form of worship. I don't think there's anything sacrosanct about how you worship. If pipe organs were the way people worshiped 100 years ago, that's awesome. We should use pipe organs if that's how that congregation chooses to worship. If it's banjo today, if Mumford & Sons is popular and that's what we want to hit on, let's bring the banjo in. And if it's piano only, that's just fine too. If it's, is this djembe or is this cajon, Phil? Is this djembe? Djembe? See, I'm not musical. If it's djembe instead of trap set, that's just fine too. So.
One thing with that question too, one of our good friends is a worship leader, and I remember him saying at one point, and it just stuck with me, that the idea of worship, sometimes we have these preferences that we have, but he said, as a worship leader, my primary goal is to not lead you, it's not to like be up there and lead you into this worship, but my primary goal is to be the lead worshiper. And that stuck with me, because I feel like sometimes we have our preferences, but if the goal is that we are worshiping God and the people on the stage, whether that's, and I actually love hymns because I grew up with hymns, and so it's like if the choice of the music at the time is their desire is to lead me into worship and they are worshiping the Lord, I think for me and for Ethan a little bit too, it's just like that sets a different tone than what am I going to perform for the church? What am I going to, so.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, here's a fun one. Who are your heroes? Why are they your heroes?
Tara, I'm going to let you go first.
Okay.
I've been leading. Should I tell a story and give you a chance to think about it? Okay.
Yeah.
So Chris Haruska, this is back in the answering machine days. You remember that? So we had a bunch of us in the rooms, and you'd call into one number, and then if you're leaving a message for anybody, you'd leave it there. So you heard everybody's messages, right? So I was on staff and found out Campus Crusade is going to do this global publication, and they've chosen us for the cover. What? Oh, this is incredible. All these people are like, you got to make sure they get taken care of. Okay, cool. There's this super responsible pastor's kid who's rooming with Chris Haruska. So I call him. His name is Seth. He's a pastor now. And he had sort of had wayward days early in college, came out of that. He was leading crew at the time. It was awesome. Super responsible, 4.0 type student. And I called him and left the message. I said, Seth, hey, here's the deal. Super long message, like it's really important that you answer their calls and be respectful and just do me a solid, right? Well, Chris Haruska gets the message, and then he calls the crew people. So they think Chris is their contact. Chris grew up in North Omaha stealing car stereos and had just come to faith like a year before, and he swore like a sailor. And so then the crew, the international crew people called Chris. So when they came, Chris was their point of contact. And he was like, oh, I can't tell some of the stories, but it was awful. And he just takes them everywhere, and he's swearing and everything. And they just thought it was the coolest evidence of God's work. And so that's how it all played out. So there's just a fun story for you.
God is
Is
bigger.
that enough time?
Yes. Okay, so I have a couple answers. One, I grew up in the 80s, and so if you are looking for an actual hero, She-Ra was my hero. So that's the first answer. Second, if you're actually asking like for a deeper answer, honestly, like as I've grown up and become a mom, I would say my mom-dad combo is kind of my hero, and that's kind of this pat answer, but it really is because I've grown in my understanding of what it takes to be a mom and what it looks like, and probably most children out there aren't there yet, but I've learned to understand why they're amazing, and I didn't know that when I was in high school and when I was under their roof. And so I feel like looking back, seeing the things they chose for me, watching how they handled me, the questions they asked me, the ways that they pointed me, the ways that they let me fail, all of that shaped me so much. And as I consider and as I've been around people through ministry, I realized that I thought that was normal, and it is not. And so I feel like they're heroes because they chose a way that not everybody chooses. And they chose to do it despite how hard it was. And now I'm understanding how hard it is. And so I really appreciate them.
Yeah, so for me, a few categories. Teachers, I'd say Tim Keller, Rick Warren. Tim Keller, super intellectual. I appreciate how much he's thought through. More than theology. I probably part with him on a handful of theological things, but just culturally thinking through the intellectual side of arguments and why Christianity is true and how to make it relevant to the modern day. I really appreciate him. Rick Warren, probably on the opposite. You guys probably heard some of this, but Purpose-Driven Life took off, made tens of millions of dollars. And so at the time that was happening, 60 Minutes, I think it was, or 2020, was doing an expose on pastors, right? Some of the, heretics who make money off of people on TV, and they'd lumped Rick Warren in there because he was making a whole bunch of money. Months before they started doing the expose, he had taken he counted up every dime he had ever received from Saddleback, and he gave it back to the church. Today, he drives like a 99 Ford Taurus or something like that. He gives 90% of his income back to the church. So he's progressively started at 10%, and then he became a reverse tither. And I just think as far as like a person you could look to as far as character, I have a buddy who knows him and goes to that church, and it's like he's the real deal. And so he's one of the guys who, when I hear his teaching, I just think, man, he just makes it so easy for a guy like me from nowhere, Nebraska, to understand, and then his life backs it up. So he's one of my heroes probably in there. There's a guy named Dan Allen, who you probably never meet, but he's Campus Crusade for Christ. He will probably spend his entire adult life raising his support to serve college students. This is MBA from Wash U. He could be a corporate executive. But he led the San Diego Summer Project for 10 years when I was a student. He invested in me. He asked me to take that over, and he's one of the guys who I really look up to. And could do anything with his life. Good night. He could do anything. And he chose to raise his support, make $40,000 a year so he could build God's kingdom, one college student at a time. It's incredible. I was going to say one more is Mo Dixon. So tell his story, and I've told it couple times, but Mozart, black guy who grew up in Northeast High School in Lincoln, Nebraska, went on to Doane. He was a basketball player, had a baby at wedlock at 15, and when you're 15 and you're a basketball player, you name your son Trey, so he did, and he wasn't that great of a three-point shooter either. He's just a really good athlete, Mo. And came to faith, ended up marrying a gal who's a basketball player at Wayne. They got married at like 20 or so. And so he'd only been a believer about a year. And Mo was coming south out of Wayne on those big hills in the winter. And his wife hit some ice and hit a semi head on. And so he pulled her out of the car, and she died in his arms. right there by Wayne. Went to the funeral and the whole deal, and he, just a month later, was like, Ethan, I think God's called me into full-time ministry. I was like, dude, it's late in the game. We raised our support. I don't think there's any way, but we can try. And so there's a handful of things happened. It ended up happening. We raised his support, and he joined us. It was supposed to be a one-year deal. It turned into a 7 or 8 year thing. Helped him finish his bachelor's, get his seminary. He helped launch City Light Lincoln, where I'm at now, where many of your kids go. And then he's getting his PhD if he hasn't gotten it yet, and he's kind of moved up in the CMA denomination. Married a gal who was crew at Wesleyan, and they're in New York City right now, and he's he's overseeing the church planting efforts in one of the boroughs of New York City. And man, he's a man of faith, and many of your kids are being discipled in City Light Lincoln because of Mo. A month after his wife died in his arms, said, "Okay, Jesus, I'll follow you wherever you go." This is a guy who his dad was a crackhead. Mom was sort of in and out of relationships, living in different houses when he grew up, and he said, "I think this is where God's calling me. I think I'll just step out, and if he raises the support, I guess that's what I'll do." And years later, you go, man, I hope at some point in my life I have that kind of faith. I could just step forward like Mo has done and to see the fruit of that. That church in Lincoln 4 years ago has baptized 220 some odd people that he led. He founded it. I worked there. They've planted 3 other churches out of there. So it's incredible. A guy like that. He's a hero.
This is a quick one. What is the most helpful book you've read in the last year?
Oh, in the last year. I read Keller's marriage book, The Meaning of Marriage. That was super helpful. I like that paradigm. In particular, out of there, just talking about the institution of marriage being instituted by God from the very beginning. And so whatever culture wants to do and however they want to define it, however the Supreme Court wants to define marriage, it just doesn't matter as a Christian. That has been defined and has been since the beginning of time. So if you mess with that, that's on you, sort of. It was my take. He doesn't say it. He's a little more eloquent than that. But it's like, it's on you if you want to mess with that. But it's going to dysfunction if you mess with it because God made it on purpose, for a purpose. He designed that. And it just won't. It won't function the way it's supposed to if you mess with it. And then the other analogy, I think it's from him, on marriage is the metaphor of amputation and divorce being similar to amputation, that, you've combined 2 people. And so if you're a culture or a church who continually promotes or makes divorce easy, it'd be very similar to a doctor who consistently makes amputation a part of your practice. Like, hey, let's just amputate. It's like, whoa, that should be a last case scenario. That should be a last ditch effort to save the body, is amputation, as opposed to, because if you were a doctor and you keep, I don't know, banks here, yeah, you don't do that, do you? No, it's not good, right? Like, we're not going to promote amputation over and over. And if you did, there's probably a problem. And as a society, culture, church, etc., if you do that, it's going to end in a disfigured body over time. I thought, man, that's a good way to think about it.
I'm currently reading J.D. Greer's Not God Enough, which is really good. So I don't know if I can count that because I'm not through it yet, but it's great to shape my ideas of who God is. Sometimes I feel like my tendency is to begin to put him in a box or make him what I want him to be, but just the constant reminder of who God is, how big he is, and what his attributes are is really helpful for me in my walk. And then probably the most helpful book is this tiny little book that I always have about 5 or 6 copies of because I just hand it out to everybody. But it's a Keller book, and it's called The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. And it's just incredibly pertinent, very potent, and it's quick read. And I've done that with a number of women this last year. And I just feel like that every time I do that book, I feel like I grow, I'm shaped, I'm reminded of who I am and who God is. And so that's probably the most helpful one that has been transferable also to other women that I've been around.
Yeah, that's pretty fun. Tara started a women's Bible study this last fall or summer. They went through that book. Was it 8, 10 women?
Well, we did a
Jillian
different study, and then we
Betchers,
did about
Jillian was
20
part of that.
in that book, yeah.
And then those women all went and led, and so now they've got 4 different Bible studies with, gosh, I don't know, 80 or 90 women involved total. So you see that multiplication effect. That's really cool.
What are some of the theological issues that you think are especially important for Christians to get right in this day and age?
Yeah, the gospel, number one. And so the core values of City Light, I love those guys, I believe in them. But they start everything with the gospel. So it's down, their core values are down, up, in, out. And I would almost say, like, hey, if you get those 4 right as a as a starting point for your faith and how you think about the Bible and your walk with God, you're going to be on solid footing. And down being the first one, that God came from heaven to earth. There's no amount of working that you can do to make yourself right before God, to enter into relationship with Him. And in the same token, God's never asked you to fake it till you make it, never asked you to put on pretenses. God's never said to David as he's in the midst of his sin, or Moses or Abraham, any of these people in the midst of their sin, hey, just put on a smile and get to church. Because that's not part of the message. The gospel is that I came for all of you in your mess, and you need me, and there's no way you could clean up. Your good works are but filthy rags to me. And so starting with the gospel, being down, and then up, is that our response to that should be worship. That we come here and we worship, that we sing songs as a response to the gospel. Not out of duty, not out of obligation, but it's saying, yes, Jesus, because you love me so much, I can't help myself, but I can't help but to respond to you. Not that I can cosmically manipulate God somehow to get the things I want in life, but it's just a response in love. And when my wife loves me, I can't help but to love her back, and that being down and then up. And then in is being that, man, we're called to be the body of Christ, to be together. I can't help but think of Acts 2 here as people come to faith. They share everything in common with one another. They rally around each other. People, when they lie to the Holy Spirit, are struck dead. And I think that should be a big part. No. But they come together and they have relationship. It's a new family that's created. And some of you had good families, and so you know what that's like. And some of you didn't. They were terrible families. And there's a promise here that in the body of Christ, there's a new family awaiting you. And then there's this interesting thing that happens if you were to take a glance throughout Scripture, is that God never calls people in. So you can just go through all of them. Come into relationship. Moses at the burning bush, take off your feet. This is holy ground. I'm going to have this special relationship with you. I'm going to call Israel into this special relationship. So you see that in nature of that? Come in. And why? He only comes in so he can be sent out. And the out is, man, I'm going to send you out. I'm going to bless you so that you can be a blessing to all nations. You see it with Isaiah. He comes into the presence of God. He overhears the Trinity having a conversation. And the Trinity says, and I'm not going to remember this exactly, but it's something to the effect of, who will I send? Who will go for me? And so Isaiah's in that presence, hearing the Trinity talk to itself. Who's going to go? And so he's in the most intimate space that he could be in the spiritual realm. And why is he in? So that he can be, who will go for me? He's sent out. You see Acts 2, come in, so that Acts 6 can happen. And a great persecution broke out, and they were scattered so that they could go where? Where Jesus told them, go into all nations. So come in to faith community, come into small group, come into relationships so that you can go out. Summarize. Down, up, in, out. Down being the gospel, and I would put that as the most important.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the only thing I would add is the idea of awe or holiness, I feel like, has been lost in our culture. And so I think one of the theological things I think is hugely important is an understanding of actually who God is, not just identifying with God or the Holy Spirit or Jesus individually, but understanding God as a whole. And then just biblical literacy, as we've probably worked more with younger people over our ministry experience, but just seeing the biblical literacy in the culture today is just really, I think, a loss. And I think there's so much that the generation ahead of us has to offer to the next generation, because this generation is not being raised up in a culture where the Bible is read, where the principles in the Bible are taught or lived out in culture. And so I feel like biblical literacy and then an awe of who our God is are two theological things that would really be important.
Yeah, that's really good. So 1950-something, Bill and Vonette Bright feel called to leave candy making, which was lucrative, to go start Campus Crusade. Bill can't convince LaVon to go. So they go out, and he's wearing a suit and a skinny tie to the beach in Southern California somewhere, LA maybe. And she's wearing a full-length dress, and they have pictures, and like, I don't know what they're called, but the short heels on the beach in California somewhere. And Bill has convinced her to go out, hey, just let's go share these 4 spiritual laws, and I think God's calling me to start Campus Crusade. And to your point with biblical literacy, that's where I'm going with that. And she said, okay, I'll go, we'll do it, but if there's no response, you're done with it, we're going to go back to candy making. And so they go out, and the first 18 people that she talks to come to faith. and so she leaves, she goes, okay, Bill, let's go do it. The rest is history, the most prolific missions movement in modern history. At one time, I don't know currently, I used to know those stats, it was the largest missionary sending organization in the history of the world. Yeah, I think there's 1 billion people have been exposed to the gospel through the Jesus film alone. And you go, whoa, well, why was that? The analogy that I've heard best is 1950-something. When you approached all those people on the beach, it was as if they were on the green, if you play golf, right? So the ball is already on the green, so all you needed was a putter. All you needed was the 4 spiritual laws to say, hey, you've known about church and God and Jesus, you're biblically literate. Here, let me tell you how you can come to faith. And a whole bunch of, you just needed the putter. And so you fast forward to 2020, and you talk to a college student, and they're starting not on the tee box. They're wondering if there's a golf course. And they're saying, hey, I don't know if objective truth is reality. I don't even know if God exists. And it's a far cry in 70 years. And that all comes back to biblical literacy. So all of a sudden now in 2020, and we have a history with college students, but I think it's with individuals in particular. I think you'll run into that, O'Neill, is you don't need a putter. You need all the clubs in the bag, and you might need GPS to help people find the golf course, in the first part, so that we can say, hey, here's a ball. Here, this is the objective, is to get in the hole, because not everybody agrees that that's the objective, if you follow the analogy. Maybe.
I thought it was great.
Yeah. That's all that matters. Let's close. Let me close this.
Okay, we're getting down to the end here, and then we're going to try and open it up a little bit. Last one. In your opinion, what's the greatest need of the church today in America? In your opinion, what's the greatest need of the church in America?
Yeah, we have the Attorney General of the state of Nebraska, who's I talk to every week. He goes to our church. If you know Nebraska Family Alliance, the president goes to our church. I talk to him every week. He's an elder on our church board. And so my personal take of the last few months is we need a backbone, is we need to be prepared as the church in America that if you're going to be gospel-centered, you're not going to shy away from preaching truth. You have to say, hey, what happens when ministers' housing allowance gets taken away if you say homosexuality is a sin? If you say marriage is defined between one man and one woman for one lifetime, and you say, hey, that's what the Bible teaches, and all of a sudden you don't have tax-exempt status anymore, you have to be prepared for that. You have to have a backbone. And you have to be prepared to do what it takes to exist and to stand firm on the truth of the gospel. When abortion is funded, and it's funded at increasing rates, and your state isn't going to get funding for other projects because they won't fund abortion, I think we need a backbone to say that's okay. It's okay. We're going to find a different way to repair our roads and our bridges, and we'll take care of our own interstate because we believe the sanctity of life is more important than our roads and our bridges. And we're going to do it. And that's going to start, and I'm biased here from those guys, and I talk to them way too often. But I think the day's coming, and I don't know that it's going to be this administration. I'm not some doomsdayer or anything like that. But I think our culture is progressing that way, and it's a matter of time. Maybe it's 30 years, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 50 years. I don't think it'll be 100. I think it'll be less than that, where the time will come that it will be deemed hate speech to say what the Bible says is truth in a public forum, and there will be consequences for it. And they won't be comfortable. People like me who have had minister's housing allowance, and it's really beneficial, it's really helpful. And when it was instituted, we as a society said, hey, it's really good for us to have pastors and ministers, and holy cow, if there were churches where they were taking care of orphans and widows, and we didn't have to do that as the state, that's a really beneficial thing. Let's subsidize that. I think it's going to come back around in reverse, and things that people like myself have gotten used to, and our churches have gotten used to with tax-exempt status, are probably going to go away with hate speech and with where we land on biblical truth. And we got to be ready for it, and we should vote accordingly, but we should be ready for those things that have been comfortable and part of American fabric to go away, and probably permanently.
Yeah, I would say I agree. And I think just in our church culture, we mirror our culture a little bit. We tend to then maybe just put church on top of what our rhythms and culture, and some of that is we like people like us. We like people who think like us, believe what we believe, all that. And that's hugely beneficial when you're talking about the biblical principles, what the Bible says, but then the idea of being a church that sits next to someone who's not like you and has the grace and ability to be next to them, but at the same time has the ability to communicate truth and hope that the Bible offers. I just think that's lacking in our churches, in our culture, because we're in a culture that promotes, no, it's okay to only group up with people just like you. And there's this huge value of representing the church as it was intended initially, Jews, Gentiles, all these people who are not like each other, being together to represent who God really is. And I think that would be huge, is coupling this idea of truth with this compassion, not just this need for justice that we see in our culture, but a compassion that Christ offers through the word and through a relationship with him.
Stephen, the first time you preached here, you said there's not a clock in here. I forgot my phone, I forgot my watch. Paul, how are we doing? We got to shut down, or can we open it up? Shut it down? Yeah. All right. Ethan is going to preach here in a little while, so I'll just, let's take a break. Thanks for being here.
All right.
Thank you.